The transport shuttle's doors hissed open, and David stepped onto the landing platform. His old work boots made quiet sounds against the smooth alien floor. The bag on his shoulder held everything he owned now, some clothes, a few tools, and a picture he tried not to look at too often. Above him, the palace looked like something from a dream. Tall towers twisted up toward three suns, their surfaces changing colors as the light hit them. Other humans from Earth were getting fancy jobs as diplomats and scientists. David was here to clean floors and fix broken things. He didn't mind. Keeping busy helped him not think about home. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms walked up to him. "You are the maintenance human?" "Yes, sir." "David Johnson. I am Supervisor Cole. Follow me." They walked through halls that seemed to go on forever. Everything was too big, made for people taller than humans. The ceilings disappeared into darkness above them. David had never seen anything so grand, but it felt cold somehow. "Empty. Your quarters are here," Cole said, stopping at a small door. "Work begins at dawn. You will clean the lower levels and repair what needs fixing. Do not go to the upper floors without permission." David nodded. The room was tiny but clean. Through the window, he could see gardens that stretched to the horizon. Somewhere in this massive place lived the Empress and her daughter. He'd heard the Empress ruled billions of people across dozens of worlds. Her husband had died in some war a couple years back. The next morning, David started work before the suns came up. The maintenance levels were quiet except for the hum of machines. He swept floors that could fit a football field, cleaned windows that looked out on alien skies, and checked systems he was still learning to understand. Around midday, alarms started going off. Red lights flashed in the corridors. David found a group of alien engineers standing around a massive water recycling unit. Green fluid was leaking everywhere. "How long to fix it?" asked one engineer. "We must order new parts." 3 days minimum, another replied. "The upper levels will have no clean water until then." David studied the machine. It was more advanced than anything on Earth, but the basic idea was the same as systems he'd worked on in the military. A pump was broken, and fluid was backing up through the wrong pipes. He looked around the maintenance room and found some spare tubing, a manual pump, and tools that would work if he was careful. Without asking permission, he started taking apart the broken section. "Human, what are you doing?" Cole appeared behind him. "Making a temporary fix," David said, not looking up from his work. "This pump here is dead, but if I reroute the flow through this secondary line and add a manual backup, we can keep water moving until your parts arrive." The alien engineers gathered around him. They whispered to each other in their own language. David kept working, his hands steady despite the strange looks he was getting. 2 hours later, clean water flowed through the upper levels again. The patch job wasn't pretty, but it worked. "Interesting solution," said Chief Engineer Rax, examining David's work. "We did not think to bypass the primary system." "Sometimes the simple way is the best way," David said, cleaning his tools. That evening, David sat alone in the small cafeteria where human staff ate their meals. He was tired but satisfied. Fixing things felt good. It reminded him of better times, when he'd had a family to fix things for. He didn't know that high above in the palace, security cameras had recorded everything he'd done that day. He didn't know that Empress Lisa had watched him work, curious about the quiet human who solved problems her own engineers couldn't handle. And he definitely didn't know that tomorrow, his simple life as a janitor would change forever when a small voice would say something that would stop the most powerful woman in the galaxy dead in her tracks. For now, David finished his meal, went back to his small room, and looked out at the alien stars. Tomorrow would bring more floors to clean, more systems to maintain, and more small repairs that kept this massive palace running. He had no idea that sometimes the smallest repairs could fix the biggest problems of all. Princess Arya loved exploring the palace. Even though she was only 6 years old, she knew every secret passage and hidden room. Her guards followed her everywhere, but they let her wander during her free time after lessons. Today felt different somehow. She had that feeling kids get when something interesting is about to happen. She skipped down a corridor she rarely visited, where the walls were plain metal instead of fancy decorations. This was where the workers stayed, the people who kept the palace running while everyone else slept. The hallways smelled like cleaning supplies and machine oil. Around the corner, she almost bumped into a man changing light bulbs in the ceiling. He was standing on a ladder, reaching up with some kind of tool she'd never seen before. The old lights had been dim and flickered sometimes. These new ones were brighter and didn't hurt her eyes. The man looked down at her and smiled. He had kind eyes and dark skin, with short hair that was starting to turn gray at the sides. Something about him made her feel safe, the way she used to feel when Daddy tucked her in at night. "Oh, hello there," David said, climbing down from the ladder. "You must be Princess Aria." She stared at him for a long moment. Her big purple eyes went wide, and her mouth opened slightly. "You look like my daddy," she said quietly. David felt his heart skip. He crouched down so he was at her eye level. "Do I really? What was your daddy like?" "He was strong like you. And tall. He always fixed things when they broke." She tilted her head, studying his face. "He had the same hands too. Worker hands, Mama calls them." "Worker hands?" "Hands that know how to make things better." David looked down at his own hands. They were scarred and calloused from years of work and war. He'd never thought of them as anything special. "Your daddy sounds like he was a good man," David said softly. "He was the best daddy in the whole galaxy. But he went away and didn't come back." Her voice got smaller. "Mama says he's watching the stars now." David felt a pain in his chest that he recognized too well. "I bet he misses you every single day." "Do you have kids?" The question hit him like a punch. For a moment, David couldn't speak. "I did. A little girl about your age, and a little boy who was 4. They're watching the stars too now." Princess Arya nodded solemnly, like this made perfect sense to her. "That's why you have sad eyes like Mama. But also kind eyes like Daddy had." High above in the royal chambers, Empress Lisa was reviewing daily reports when the palace's monitoring system picked up her daughter's voice. She had security feeds throughout the palace, but she rarely watched them unless there was trouble. Something in her daughter's tone made her look up at the screen. She watched her little girl talking to the human maintenance worker, and felt her breath catch. Arya hadn't spoken about her father in almost 2 years. After the funeral, she'd simply stopped mentioning him, as if talking about him made the pain worse. But here she was, chatting easily with a stranger about the man they'd both loved and lost. Lisa studied the human on the screen. There was something familiar about the way he moved, patient and careful. Her late husband had been the same way, always taking time to explain things, never rushing when someone needed his attention. "Mama says I shouldn't talk to strangers," Arya said, but she didn't move away. "Your mama's very smart. She's right to keep you safe. But you're not really a stranger. You work in our house. And you have daddy hands." David smiled despite himself. "Daddy hands?" "Hands that fix broken things and make them work again. Mama has queen hands that sign important papers. I have princess hands that are still learning things. But you have daddy hands." She reached out and touched one of his fingers with her tiny blue hand. "See? Just like daddy's." David felt tears starting behind his eyes, but he blinked them back. This little girl had lost her father in the same war that took his family. They were both survivors of something terrible, finding a moment of connection in an alien palace far from Earth. "Would you like to see how these new lights work?" David asked, pointing to the LED fixtures he'd been installing. "Yes, please." As David explained the simple technology in words a 6-year-old could understand, neither of them noticed the guards watching nervously, or the cameras recording everything, or the Empress in her tower studying the human who had somehow reached her daughter's heart when no one else could. For 10 minutes, it was just a man and a little girl, talking about lights and missing the people they loved. But those 10 minutes were about to change everything. The lights went out all at once. Not just in one room, but everywhere. David was fixing a ventilation unit in the basement when darkness swallowed the palace whole. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Alarms started blaring from every direction. David could hear running footsteps above him as palace staff rushed around in panic. He grabbed his flashlight and headed toward the main engineering section, following the sound of shouting voices. The engineering bay was chaos. 20 alien technicians stood around glowing screens, their faces painted red by warning lights. Chief Engineer Rax was barking orders in 3 different languages while his team ran diagnostics on systems David couldn't even pronounce. "How bad is it?" David asked, approaching the main control panel. "Catastrophic," Rax replied without looking at him. "The primary power grid is failing section by section. Each failure triggers the next one. We've lost 60% of the palace's power, and it's still dropping." David studied the massive display showing the palace's power network. It looked like a spider web with holes growing larger by the minute. Red zones spread across the map like a disease. What about backup power? Only working in critical areas. Life support, communications, security. Everything else is dark. The royal quarters are on backup, but even that won't last more than 12 hours. Can you replace the failed components? Rax made a sound that might have been laughing if it wasn't so bitter. We need 17 primary relay units, 43 junction boxes, and over 200 meters of main power cable. Even if we had the parts, which we don't, it would take our manufacturing facility 3 days to produce them. David walked closer to the display. The failed sections formed a pattern that reminded him of something from his military days. During the war, Earth's power grids had been constantly under attack. They'd learned to adapt, to work around damage instead of waiting for perfect repairs. What if you don't replace them? The engineering team stopped what they were doing and stared at him. Excuse me? Rax said. What if instead of trying to fix the main grid, you work around it? Create alternate pathways using the secondary systems. The secondary systems aren't designed to carry primary loads. They would burn out immediately. Not if you distribute the load differently. David moved to the control panel, his fingers hovering over switches he barely understood. May I? Rax looked around at his team. Several of them shrugged. They were out of options anyway. Show me, Rax said. David started small. Instead of trying to power entire sections through single main lines, he began breaking the load into smaller pieces. He used maintenance conduits, emergency backup lines, and even some systems that weren't technically part of the power grid at all. This is insane, muttered one of the junior engineers. You're turning our centralized system into a mesh network, David finished. If one part fails, the power routes around it automatically. It's not as efficient as your main grid, but it's much harder to break. For the next 4 hours, David worked alongside the alien engineers. They were brilliant with their advanced technology, but they thought in straight lines. David thought in curves, finding paths through the palace's systems that the designers had never intended. He used the water circulation pumps to carry power cables. He routed electricity through the communication lines when they weren't in use. He even figured out how to use the palace's artificial gravity generators as temporary power storage units. The alien engineers watched in amazement as this human janitor turned their sophisticated palace into something that resembled the jury-rigged bases he'd built during wartime on Earth. There, David said finally, wiping sweat from his forehead. Try it now. Rax activated the modified system. Slowly, lights began coming back on throughout the palace. Not everywhere, and not at full brightness, but enough. The red warning displays turned yellow, then green. Incredible, Rax whispered. The power distribution is actually more stable now than it was before the failure. It's not pretty, David admitted, looking at the tangled web of connections they'd created. But it works. And if something breaks tomorrow, it won't take down the whole palace. Word of what David had done spread quickly through the palace. By evening, even the upper levels knew about the human maintenance worker who had saved them all from spending days in the dark. Princess Arya found David later that night, sitting alone in the maintenance bay. He was tired, his clothes dirty from crawling through access tunnels all day. She climbed up onto the workbench beside him. Mama says you saved the whole palace today, she said, offering him half of a sweet fruit snack from her pocket. Just fixed some wires, David replied, accepting the snack gratefully. Daddy used to look tired like this after he fixed big important things too, Arya observed. But happy tired, not sad tired. David smiled. Happy tired. I like that. High above them, Empress Lisa watched the security feed and wondered how a simple maintenance worker had accomplished what her best engineers said was impossible. The palace was quiet at 3 in the morning. David couldn't sleep, so he decided to check on some repairs he'd made earlier. The maintenance tunnels were peaceful at night, just the soft hum of machinery and the distant sounds of automated systems doing their work. He was adjusting a ventilation unit when he heard something that didn't belong. A soft beeping sound, barely audible. Then another one, from a different direction. David froze, his military training kicking in like muscle memory he'd tried to forget. Those weren't maintenance sounds. Those were security alarms being quietly disabled. David turned off his flashlight and moved silently through the tunnels. He knew these passages better than anyone now, could navigate them in complete darkness. The beeping sounds were getting closer to the upper levels, following a path that would lead directly to the royal quarters. Through a ventilation grate, he saw them. 6 figures in dark clothing, moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. They carried weapons he recognized, energy disruptors that could cut through palace security like paper. These weren't thieves or protesters. These were assassins. David's hands started shaking, not from fear but from memories he'd buried deep. The last time he'd seen weapons like those, his family had died. The last time he'd moved through corridors like this, he'd been the one hunting enemies through the darkness. But that was another life. He was a janitor now, a man who fixed things instead of breaking them. Then he thought of Princess Arya, probably sleeping peacefully in her bed, trusting that the adults around her would keep her safe. David's hands stopped shaking. He moved quickly but quietly to the nearest maintenance station and gathered what he needed. A plasma cutter used for metal work. Some cleaning chemicals that could be mixed into something more dangerous. Wire and tools that could become traps if you knew how to use them. The first assassin never saw David coming. One moment he was disabling a door lock, the next he was unconscious on the floor. David caught the man's weapon before it could clatter and wake the others. The second assassin turned just in time to see David swinging a heavy wrench. He dropped like a stone. The remaining four realized they were under attack, but they couldn't figure out where the threat was coming from. David used the maintenance tunnels like a spider uses its web, appearing from one direction to strike, then vanishing before they could respond. He'd rigged the corridor with improvised traps using cleaning supplies and spare wire. When the third assassin stepped on a pressure plate David had made from bathroom scales and electrical components, foam designed for cleaning spills expanded around his feet, hardening instantly and trapping him in place. The fourth assassin got caught in a tangle of maintenance cables that David had strung across a doorway. By the time he cut himself free, David was already behind him. The last two tried to make a run for the royal quarters, but David had sabotaged their route. Emergency barriers dropped, sealing them in a section of corridor with no way out except through him. When palace security finally arrived, following the trail of unconscious intruders, they found David sitting calmly in the hallway. Princess Arya was in his arms, wide awake but unharmed. She'd woken up when the emergency systems activated and had found David in the corridor outside her room. "How did you?" Security Commander Vale stared at the unconscious assassins scattered around the area. "How did a maintenance worker do this?" David looked up at him with tired eyes. "Staff Sergeant David Johnson, 82nd Airborne Division, Earth Defense Forces. Served 3 tours in the Outer Rim conflicts before taking discharge." The corridor fell silent except for the sound of security teams checking the unconscious intruders. "You're military?" Commander Vale asked. "Was military. I came here to be something else." David adjusted his hold on Princess Arya, who had fallen back asleep against his shoulder. But some things you never really stop being. Word spread through the palace faster than fire. The human janitor was actually a decorated war veteran. The quiet man who fixed their lights and cleaned their floors had single-handedly stopped an assassination attempt using nothing but maintenance supplies and skills he'd learned in humanity's most brutal conflicts. By morning, the story had reached the noble families who controlled the outer worlds. Some whispered that David was a spy, planted by Earth's government to infiltrate the palace. Others said he was dangerous, that humans were too violent to be trusted in civilized society. But Empress Lisa had watched the security recordings. She'd seen how carefully David had moved, how he'd used the minimum force necessary to stop each threat. She'd seen him risk his own life to reach her daughter's room first, to make sure she was safe before dealing with the remaining assassins. Most importantly, she'd seen the pain in his eyes when Commander Vale called him by his military rank. This wasn't a man who enjoyed violence. This was someone who'd seen too much of it and wanted desperately to leave it behind. That afternoon, she summoned him to her private chambers for a conversation that would change both their lives forever. The royal chambers were nothing like David had imagined. He'd expected gold and jewels everywhere, but instead found a comfortable room with soft chairs and family pictures on the tables. Empress Lisa sat by a large window overlooking the palace gardens, watching her daughter play with other children far below. "Please, sit down," she said without turning around. "And don't call me your majesty. Just Lisa is fine." David remained standing. "I should explain about last night. I know my background wasn't in my official records." "I know exactly who you are, David Johnson." Lisa finally turned to face him. "I've spent the morning reading your military file. 3 tours of duty. 2 medals for bravery. Lost your wife and 2 children in the bombing of New Detroit Colony." David's jaw tightened. "Then you know why I left all that behind." "Do I?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you brought the best parts with you." Lisa stood and walked to her desk, where security footage from the night before played on a small screen. "You could have killed those men. Your training, your anger, the weapons they carried, no one would have questioned it. That's not who I want to be anymore. But you chose to be someone who saves children instead. Someone who fixes broken things and makes them work better than before." Lisa paused the video at the moment David was holding her daughter. Someone who puts himself between danger and the people who can't protect themselves. David looked down at his hands. The same hands Princess Arya had called daddy hands just days ago. I just did what needed doing. What needed doing was the work of a soldier. But how you did it was the work of a father. Lisa's voice got softer. When Robert died in the war, I thought Arya would never trust anyone again. She barely spoke for months. Then you showed up and suddenly she's talking about fixing things and helping people. She's a good kid. Reminds me of... David stopped himself. Of your daughter. Yeah. Same age when I lost her. Same curious eyes, always asking questions about how things work. Lisa walked over to the window again. Below, Princess Arya was showing other children how to plant flowers, her small hands gentle with the soil. She asks about you every day now. Where's David? Is he fixing something important? Can I help him? I don't want to confuse her. I'm just the maintenance guy. Are you? Because last night you became the man who saved her life. This morning you're the person she trusts most in the world besides me. Lisa turned back to him. And I'm starting to think that maybe that's exactly what we both need. David looked up sharply. Oh. I have a proposal for you. Not as an empress to her subject, but as a mother to someone who understands loss. Lisa sat down across from him. Be Arya's guardian. Officially. Help me raise her. Help me teach her that the galaxy can be a good place, even after bad things happen. I'm not qualified to raise a princess. You're qualified to raise a child who's lost her father. You're qualified to show her that broken things can be fixed, that broken people can heal. Lisa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've been ruling an empire, but I've been failing at the most important job I have. Being her mother. David was quiet for a long time. Through the window, he could see Princess Arya looking up at the palace, searching for something. For someone. What would people say? A human janitor becoming part of the royal family? They'll say whatever they want to say. But Arya will have a father again. And I'll have someone who understands what it means to lose everything and still choose to protect others. That evening, David found Princess Arya in the palace gardens. She was sitting alone on a bench, holding a small flower she'd picked. Hey there, he said, sitting down beside her. What's that you've got? It's a memory flower. Mema says when you give one to someone special, they remember good things. She held it out to him. This is for you, for keeping me safe. David took the small blue flower. Thank you, sweetheart. David? Mema says you might stay here forever and be my new daddy. Is that true? David looked at this little girl who'd lost her father in the same war that took his family. She was brave and kind and curious about everything, just like his daughter had been. Would you like that? Yes, please. I missed having a daddy. I missed having a little girl to take care of. 6 months later, the palace held its first wedding in 5 years. It was small and private, just family and close friends. Princess Arya stood between David and her mother, holding both their hands as they promised to take care of each other. The little girl who'd once said he looks like daddy now had a daddy again. And the man who'd thought he'd lost his chance to be a father discovered that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, built from broken pieces that fit together perfectly. In the end, David never did stop being a maintenance worker. He just found bigger, more important things to fix.